2, 3, 4 layers. Hi, I'm Yuval, and we're gonna make puff pastry today. We're gonna make the perfect puff pastry with perfect layers. And basically, puff pastry is a dough made out of layers of dough and layers of fat. In our case, butter. You can use margarine and all that stuff, but you need hardened fat. You can't use oil or something like that. So what is puff pastry? Puff pastry is basically a dough which is made out of layers of dough and layers of butter. What happens in the baking process, when you have layers of dough and layers of fat and layers of dough and layers of fat, the layers of fat are basically separating between the layers of dough, more or less. And more or less, the layers of dough, each layer is taking the baking process separately, which means the first layer puffs and it doesn't completely stick to the next layer because it's separated by a layer of fat. And the second layer puffs and kind of takes everything up, and it doesn't completely stick to the next layer because it's separated by a layer of fat, and so forth and so on. And you get a very, very nice and crispy because of the butter that is kind of frying the dough from the outside. You get a very crispy outcome, and let's see how it's made, right? So we're just gonna make the dough, and the dough basically is made out of two parts, the dough itself and the butter, which we are gonna incorporate into the dough later, okay? Here's the recipe. The dough itself is made out of flour, water and vinegar, which is already inside, butter inside the dough as well as outside the dough. The flour I'm using is a regular flour. You don't want a strong flour, you don't want a bread flour. And the vinegar I'm using is, in this case, rice vinegar. You can use any kind of vinegar you want, it doesn't matter. And basically what happens in the baking for the puff pastry, it actually puffs because there's water inside the dough. And when the water takes the temperature, it evaporates and everything rises, yeah? And the vinegar inside, which I already put inside the water, the vinegar is gonna puff extremely stronger and in lower temperatures. So basically, vinegar in these doughs, what it does, it gives an extra puff, and it's really recommended. So what we're gonna do when we make the dough is just put everything inside, no order or anything, just everything inside: the flour and the water and the vinegar, sugar and the salt, and our softened butter. Actually, my butter is a bit melted and I'm not gonna throw it away, but what's really recommended is just have soft butter. It doesn't need to be melted, but it's gonna be fine. And we're gonna mix it only until it's coherent, right? You don't want to overmix it, only until it's coherent. Okay, so it's completely coherent, you don't want to develop the gluten here. Basically, if you overmix it, like let's say if you mix it for 30 seconds extra, what's gonna happen is your products are gonna shrink in the baking process much more than they would usually. And also it will make it harder for you to work while folding, and also when it shrinks, it will be a bit less nice. It will be like kind of a bit more ugly. Okay, so now the dough is complete. We're gonna cling film it and cool it until it's cooled and approximately like Play-Doh in its texture and its hardness, right? And it's gonna take about 10 minutes in a normal household freezer. And of course, you don't want it to freeze, but just use your freezer, and so it will cool fast. If it does start to freeze on the edges, put it in the fridge, right? Okay, so now that we have our dough in the cooling, we're gonna make our butter block, and then we're gonna combine them together when the dough is cold, right? So basically, we want a butter which is roughly the size of the dough, right? So I have here the butter. It's 260 grams by the recipe, and I just put it on a baking parchment. I think many people have actually seen me do this before. And what we do, we close the baking parchment on it. And using a rolling pin, just soften the butter a bit, Alright, and when it's a bit softer and it's easier to work, what I do is I don't actually start messing with the butter. I just close the paper to a size which by memory is roughly the size of the dough itself, alright? And of course I make sure all the seams are downwards, and using the rolling pin just make sure the butter goes everywhere. Okay, so great, we have our butter block. You see, it's not perfect, it doesn't need to be perfect, just a waste of time to start making it like completely straight. And once the dough is cold, we're gonna combine these two together. It's so easy. Okay, so our dough has been in the fridge for about 10 minutes and it's nice and cool, like plastilene, like Play-Doh. And now we're gonna incorporate the butter and start making our perfect folds, our perfect layers. So take off the cling film and put the cling film aside. You're gonna use it soon. And make sure, to dust your surface with a bit of flour. And of course, if you don't know the professional throw, just do like this, no problem. And basically, you see, we have the dough and the butter more or less the same size. And in the first stage, what we're gonna do, we're gonna envelop the dough around the butter, right? So what I'm doing is I'm gonna open the dough only to one direction, right? Just twice as big as the butter, and then it can just envelop it around, right? So here goes. Even in this stage, when you use your rolling pin, try to do it evenly, press evenly on the dough so you don't get like really big mountains of dough on one side and really shallow on the other side. Just make it forcefully and evenly, like in life. Okay, so I think that's about it. Let's see. You see, now I can envelop my dough around it. Okay, and of course we want to check the butter. The butter needs to be flexible and the dough needs to be flexible, right? So you cannot have your butter too cold, because if you put it in the dough and you start rolling, it will break into lumps. You want it to be flexible, not too soft also. And the butter and the dough needs to be of the same consistency, more or less. That's perfect. Yeah. And when I finished making my butter block, you can put it in the fridge, and then when you take it out, you just use your rolling pin to soften it a bit, to make it flexible, right? If it makes a wave like this, it's flexible, it's fine. So I take off my baking parchment, place the butter, get rid of the parchment. Okay. And you see, my butter is actually a bit too soft than it could be, but for me it's fine. I've done this so many times. For you, you want it maybe to be a bit colder than this, but this is fine, right? And now what we do, we just fold the dough around it and kind of close all these gaps. Make sure you don't see any butter. You don't want it to come out later, right? And now what we have here is we have one layer of dough, inside one huge layer of butter, and on the top another layer of dough. And basically it's two layers of dough, and it doesn't, by the way, this doesn't count as folding. This is just the first step in enveloping the butter. And what we want to do, we want to start rolling it out and folding it onto itself, so we get more thinner layers of butter, okay, to separate our beautiful dough. So when we start rolling it, I hope it makes sense that it's better to roll it to this side and not to this direction, because if you bring the camera closer from a top view, right? From a top view, you can see this seam here, right? That's where I enveloped the butter, and if we roll it to that direction, it might open. Okay, to this direction, it's better. Also, it will give you a better result, more even result. Okay? So when you start rolling in the beginning, be gentle. Okay, don't start really hard, because this is the stage where you spread your butter. And if you use too much force, let's say if I pound the dough here, I won't have butter here, it will go to the other sides. I will not know this happened until it's baked. Then I will see something is not even, right? So in the beginning, forcefully and evenly, but not too forcefully. And ideally, we want to spread it out, we want to roll it out to about 1/2 centimeter. Okay, that's about it. And the first fold we're going to make is called a single fold, and it gives us 3 layers. And this is where the layers we can start counting them. Okay? So the first fold is you just take 1/3 of the dough onto itself, and the last 1/3 onto the first 1/3. Okay? And you have 3 layers of dough. Right? Now I want to make another fold. I want to make the butter thinner still, because it's not enough, right? And I want to roll it out again and fold it again. And of course, if you can see the dough, we already opened it to that direction, right? You see how I folded it? We already opened it to that direction. Now we're going to open it to a different direction. So turn your dough 90 degrees, clockwise, counterclockwise, it doesn't matter. And in the beginning, I'm giving these like locking motions, because I want to lock the dough to itself. There's nothing sticking the dough. There's nothing sticking the layers together, right? And I might as well, while rolling, come back to this locking motion if I see the layers are moving, right? So lock it in place, tack, 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 and start rolling. And again, you're looking to get to about 1/2 centimeter, right? And each fold you're going to make, it's going to be slightly more difficult to roll, because the dough is getting more and more elastic. The gluten is developing over time, and especially over the movement you're giving it, right? But it's still very easy. So you see, I have about 1/2 centimeter, just a bit more, I'll do it. And again, a single fold, right? 1/3 of the dough onto itself, and the other 1/3 onto the first 1/3. And now this is basically my second fold which I made. If you want to count the layers, we had the first fold gave us 3 layers, and this fold gives us another 3 layers, but it's not 3 plus 3, it's 3 multiple times 3. So basically now you have 9 layers. Yeah, each time you fold it, you kind of multiply the layers, right? Now, what people will tell you, and they're absolutely right, is now cling film it and put it in the fridge for about 30 minutes at least. Because we opened the dough to this direction in the first fold, and then we folded it and we opened it to the second direction, okay? So the dough has been stretched here and it's been stretched there. There's a limit how much your dough can stretch. It can absolutely, start tearing up, and the butter might go away, etc. So best thing is to put it, cling film it, put it in the fridge for 30 minutes, and after it's been in the fridge, we can take it out and work with it. However, if you can, and this depends on your ability in the technique, if you can actually give it another fold, right? Straight away without resting, and then you save yourself a lot of time. Right? So I am going to try and give it another fold, and again I'm flipping it 90 degrees in any direction. Again, I'm giving it this locking motion, and I don't know if you can see this, but now when I'm rolling, the dough actually resists much more. Yeah, when I roll it forward, it shrinks backwards, kind of like a rubber, right? And that's normal. Each fold you're gonna give it is gonna be a bit harder, especially if it didn't rest. But let's put it this way: as long as it doesn't tear, it's fine, right? So if you can work with it, it's fine. If you cannot, just put it in the fridge for resting. Of course, time is money, so we're trying to shorten things, the amount of time they take to make. You can also use this technique where you just let it kind of fall from the table, and then you use your rolling pin and you just leave your rolling pin here. And what happens, you have the dough stretching it with the gravity of itself, of its own weight from one side, and the rolling pin holding it from the other side, and you get this really nice stretch. And basically, when the dough stretches and is left in this stretched position, it will actually relax into this position and kind of embrace this new position, right? So this is a good way if you don't want to, put too much force into it. Just let it rest for a minute, and then you see it doesn't stretch. It doesn't shrink from this new position. And then I do it to the other side, and this is a really good way to do it. And now we're going to do a double fold, and it looks like this. Camera to the dough. You take the dough about 2/3 onto itself, and the smaller quarter or third, whatever, you fold it onto itself, and the bigger side onto the smaller side. And this actually gives you 4 layers, right? So we made 2 single turns and 1 double turn, and we made all this without resting. We want to do stuff fast and have them really taste good. So now we're going to cling film it, put it in the fridge for about 30-35 minutes, and then we open it to its final form, throw it in the oven, and in 25 minutes later we can start eating. Okay, so this was how to make your perfect puff pastry with the perfect layering, and we didn't actually do anything with it today. So if you want to check out what you can do with it, of course you didn't just make it so it will lie in the fridge. Check out these videos, alright, and in the links below, and I'll see you next time.